You ever get that feeling that something's not quite right, but you can't explain why? Like your gut is trying to tell you something, but your brain hasn't caught up yet? That was me, sitting at the kitchen table one rainy Thursday evening, a pen in my hand, staring at a random stack of documents my wife had just slid in front of me. "It's just some refinance paperwork," she said with a smile too sweet to be real, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. That's when the chill crept down my spine. My name's Kyle, I'm 38 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought I had a solid grip on my life. Steady job in IT, modest house in the suburbs outside Chicago, decent retirement savings, and a 10-year marriage that, while not exactly passionate anymore, felt safe. Predictable. Stable. We didn't have kids, by choice mostly, and I thought that mutual decision meant we were in sync. I was wrong. So wrong. I met Morgan in my late 20s. She was charming, quick-witted, beautiful in that girl-next-door kind of way, and more importantly, she made me feel like I wasn't just some socially awkward tech guy crunching code. We clicked fast. Maybe too fast. We moved in together after 6 months, and were married within a year. Everyone told me it was rushed, but when you're in love, you don't hear warnings. You hear jealousy. Or at least, that's what I told myself. For the first few years, things were fine. We built a life. We traveled here and there, saved for a home, adopted a rescue dog named Peanut. But something in her changed over time, little by little. I used to blame it on the stress of her job. She bounced around between marketing gigs and remote freelance stuff. But now I realize it wasn't the job. It was me not seeing the signs. She became more distant around year 7. Not in a dramatic way, just emotionally unplugged. Conversations felt like interviews. Affection turned into duty. She'd roll her eyes when I'd suggest a weekend trip or a movie night. Said she was tired. Said I was being clingy. I stopped bringing it up. I thought maybe I was just being needy or overly nostalgic. But what I couldn't ignore was how she started getting more involved with our finances all of a sudden. At first, it was subtle. She'd ask me to forward her copies of our tax returns, or she'd casually mention how she wanted to get a better handle on our budget. Then it became more persistent. She wanted to be added as the primary contact on our mortgage. She asked for login details to my private retirement accounts, saying, "It just makes things easier in case something happens." That phrase, "in case something happens," started showing up a lot. It set off a quiet alarm in the back of my head, but I didn't have evidence. Just a creeping unease. Then came that Thursday evening, with those papers on the table. She was acting calm, overly calm, like a bad actress trying to sell a performance. I didn't touch the pen. I just tilted my head and asked, "Why don't I take a look through these and sign them tomorrow?" Her smile faltered for a split second. Blink and you miss it, but it was there. That crack in the facade. She shrugged it off. "Sure, babe. No rush." But I saw the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. I stayed up that night reading every page. They weren't refinance documents. At least, not entirely. Buried beneath some generic paperwork was a clause granting her authority to act on my behalf for certain financial matters. Power of attorney, limited, but still. Enough to make my stomach knot up. Why would she need that? I didn't sleep that night. I laid next to her while she snored lightly, her back turned to me, and my mind spun in circles. Was she planning something? Was she in debt and trying to use my name to bail herself out? Was this some weird insurance scam? I didn't know, but I knew I had to act carefully. Quietly. Over the next week, I became the world's most polite husband. I brought her coffee in the mornings. I asked about her day. I kissed her goodnight. And while I was playing the doting spouse, I was also scheduling private meetings with my bank manager and financial advisor. I didn't tell anyone, not even my older brother, who's basically my best friend, because I couldn't be sure who she might talk to. I moved my direct deposit to a new private account. I rerouted access to my retirement funds and shifted assets out of our joint accounts into safe, solo holdings under a trust my father had set up for me years ago, but never activated. And through it all, Morgan acted like nothing was wrong. She was cheerier than usual, almost bubbly. She suggested we go out to dinner one night, just because. She bought a new dress. She even initiated, well, let's say marital intimacy, for the first time in months. It felt wrong. Like she was putting on a show for someone. I wondered if she thought she'd already won. Then, exactly 2 weeks after that stack of papers showed up, she sat across from me at the kitchen table again. Only this time, she wasn't smiling. She was unreadable. Her hands were folded. Peanut lay at her feet, sensing the tension but not knowing what it meant. "I want a divorce," she said, with all the warmth of a voicemail prompt. I stared at her for a full 5 seconds. Not because I was surprised, but because she actually looked satisfied. Like she thought she was about to drop a bomb on me and walk away unscathed. Maybe even victorious. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she continued. "This can be amicable if we keep things simple. 50-50 split. You keep the house, I'll take the condo in Florida. We divide the accounts evenly, no drama." I nodded slowly. "You sure about this?" She smiled. That same too sweet smile from 2 weeks ago. "I'm sure." What she didn't know, what she couldn't have predicted, is that her lawyer would be calling mine just 2 days later in a panic. And he would whisper words that made her go pale, right there in the conference room. "Wait, he doesn't own anything in his name." But we're not there yet. We're still at the part where I sat across from my wife of 10 years, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. A woman who had clearly planned something behind my back. A woman who wasn't even pretending to be heartbroken or conflicted. She wanted out, and she wanted the spoils. And I was going to let her walk right into the mess she built. Because if she wanted a war, she should have picked someone who hadn't been raised by a father who spent 30 years navigating the corporate legal jungle. She should have picked someone who didn't spend his free time reading contracts for fun. She should have picked someone who didn't already know her next 10 moves. But she didn't. She picked me. And I wasn't about to roll over and play the fool. Not this time. I wish I could say her divorce announcement rattled me, that it broke my heart or left me dazed and gasping. But it didn't. What I felt, sitting there in that quiet kitchen with the rain tapping the windows, was confirmation. I hadn't been paranoid. I hadn't overreacted. Something had been off. I just hadn't known how deep the rot went. "I'm sure," she'd said, cool and crisp like it was a business transaction. Not an end to a decade of memories, travel, arguments, compromises, and quiet mornings spent folding laundry side by side. It was chilling, honestly, how little emotion she had. Like she'd already mourned the loss of the marriage in private and was just going through the last step of some solo plan she'd drawn up. She told me I could stay in the house. That was her opening gesture, like she was being generous. "You've always loved this place," she said, "and I figure I'll just move into the condo full time. You know, for a fresh start." The condo. The one we had bought in Florida as a potential future retirement property. Joint purchase. Joint deed. Joint renovations. But now it was just hers? I didn't argue. I just nodded, and she seemed pleased by that. Thought she'd caught me off guard enough to stay pliable. Thought I was already grieving, trying to cling to the scraps of a peaceful ending. I played along. Let her believe it. But that night, I lay in bed for hours, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Morgan didn't even come to bed. Said she was going to sleep in the guest room until the divorce was processed. That was the word she used. Processed. Like it was a file at the DMV. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. I found a note on the kitchen island with a smiley face at the end. "At brunch with Leslie. Don't forget to sign the power bill. Due today, smiling face with smiling eyes." The gall. The normalcy. I sat down in silence, coffee untouched, just trying to wrap my head around how easily she switched gears. Was she seeing someone? Had she been seeing someone? The idea crawled into my brain and wouldn't leave. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were falling into place. Over the next few days, things got weird. Not dramatic, not openly hostile, but weird. Like she was trying to provoke something without actually lighting the fuse. She started making strange comments. "When I move out, I'll finally have a place that feels like mine." Or, "You should really start learning to cook for one." I couldn't tell if she was trying to make me feel small or if she genuinely thought I'd be lost without her. Then the bank notification started. First, a $1,200 purchase from some upscale boutique in downtown Chicago. Then a $600 charge at a spa. Then $300 at a store I'd never heard of. All on the joint credit card. All within 48 hours. When I brought it up, she waved it off. I figured I should stock up before everything gets split. Just in case. "Split?" I asked. "As in debts too?" She blinked at me like I'd spoken Klingon. "No, of course not. You'll take care of the card. You always have." That was her logic. Her entitlement. Because I'd been the one paying down our credit cards responsibly all these years, she assumed I'd just eat whatever she piled onto it before the divorce went through. Like it was part of my job description. I didn't say anything. I just walked out and called the bank. Froze the card. She came home that night in a mood. "You froze the card?" she said, standing in the hallway with shopping bags in both hands. Yes, I replied calmly. We agreed to keep things fair. Racking up charges and expecting me to eat them isn't fair. She dropped the bags onto the floor with a thud. Wow, real mature, Kyle. And just like that, the mask started to slip. That was the first fight, the first real crack. And after that, the house became a battlefield. Passive-aggressive comments turned into cold shoulders. Cold shoulders turned into snide remarks. She accused me of being bitter and petty, said I was trying to punish her, all because I wouldn't let her empty our accounts on a shopping spree. But the worst part, the part that actually hurt, was how she started poisoning our mutual friendships. I got a call from Sam, one of my old college friends who'd grown close to both of us over the years. Hey man, he said, I just wanted to check in. Morgan told me you've been acting erratic? Erratic? I repeated. What exactly did she say? She said you've been shutting her out, hiding finances, and refusing to talk to her. That you're being controlling. I don't know. Man, it just didn't sound like you. It wasn't me. And it wasn't true. I realized then that she wasn't just trying to take things. She was trying to rewrite the narrative. Paint herself as the victim in a story she'd already outlined. And me? I was the unstable, possessive husband. The controlling one. The one who forced her to escape. That's when the real anger started brewing in me. Not because she was leaving, but because she was trying to torch my character on the way out. Then came the final straw. One evening, I came home from work and noticed a few picture frames missing from the living room. At first, I thought maybe she was packing early. But then I saw the empty space in the office. My laptop was gone. Not my work laptop, the personal one. The one I used for financial spreadsheets, personal documents, encrypted notes. My entire digital footprint. I bolted down the hall to the guest room. Her door was shut. I knocked once. Nothing. I opened it anyway. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, my laptop in front of her. No shame. No guilt. Just a smug little smirk. You took my laptop? I said, trying to stay calm. I needed to look at something, she replied. You went through my private files? She shrugged. You've been acting so secretive lately. I figured if you're hiding something, I have a right to know. That was it. That was the moment something snapped inside me. It wasn't just the invasion of privacy. It was the justification. The entitlement. The belief that she had a right to violate my trust because I didn't roll over when she started circling like a vulture. I want it back. Now. She slammed it shut and handed it to me with a roll of her eyes. Relax. I didn't find anything interesting. And you know what? Maybe she didn't. Because everything important, everything sensitive, had already been moved, encrypted, or deleted from that device. But that wasn't the point. The point was that she'd gone from passive-aggressive manipulation to open theft and spying. I spent that night in the garage, sitting in my car, windows up, radio off. Just staring at the steering wheel and wondering how I'd let things get this far. How I'd shared a home, a bed, a life with someone who didn't think twice about invading mine. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a hostile takeover. She wanted control. She wanted leverage. And she wanted to leave me broken, looking like the bad guy, while she slipped away with half, or more, of everything I'd built. But she'd miscalculated. Because while she'd been grinning at brunch and sliding papers across the table, I'd been quietly, methodically preparing for this very moment. And I had one last move that would flip her entire game on its head. The betrayal was clear now. The lies. The manipulation. The smear campaign with our friends. The shopping sprees. The laptop. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, is that the next phase had already begun. I had already moved every dollar I legally could into protected trusts. I had already signed over ownership of our cars to my brother. I had already shifted the business account I'd been building for years under a new LLC registered in my cousin's name. So when she walked into that lawyer's office 2 weeks later with her carefully rehearsed list of demands, she was going to hear something that would freeze the blood in her veins. Wait, he doesn't own anything in his name. But we're not there yet. Because first, she's going to push one step too far. And when she does, the real fun begins. If you'd told me 6 months ago that my wife would steal my laptop, try to smear my name, and file for divorce with a smirk on her face, I wouldn't have believed you. Not because she was some angel or because we had a fairy tale romance, but because I genuinely thought we were solid enough. Predictable. Boring, even. The kind of couple you don't really notice at dinner parties. Not too lovey-dovey, not too distant. Just fine. But nothing about this was fine anymore. After the laptop incident, I finally stopped pretending everything was salvageable. I stopped hoping for a quiet ending. There's a moment, a specific moment, where you realize the version of someone you loved no longer exists. And what's worse is realizing that maybe that version never existed at all. I was done playing defense. But that didn't mean I was ready to go to war. Not yet. For a couple of weeks after that, things just unraveled. She barely spoke to me, didn't even try to fake politeness. She moved around the house like a guest, her coffee mug always rinsed and left on the drying rack, never in the dishwasher, like she didn't want to leave fingerprints. She started packing little things here and there. Books, jewelry, her yoga mat, things she could claim without question. But then she got bold again. One morning I came home from an early grocery run and noticed the safe in our bedroom closet was open. Wide open, like she hadn't even tried to cover it up. The stack of savings bonds my grandfather left me? Gone. Birth certificates, passports, removed and neatly stacked on the bed. She was sitting at the edge of the mattress like she was waiting for me. I figured we should divide things now before the lawyers get involved, she said flatly. No point in dragging this out. You took the bonds, I said, voice tight. They were ours, Kyle. Community property. No, I corrected. They were a gift to me from my grandfather. Long before we were married. She shrugged. Then prove it. I didn't yell. I didn't even flinch. I just walked into the kitchen, picked up my phone, and called my attorney. That was the first time I felt it. The shift. Not fear. Not anger. But control. Quiet, grounded, steady control. Because I knew she had no idea what was coming. Still, that didn't mean I wasn't rattled. Truth be told, I was hanging on by threads behind the scenes. Every day I'd drive to work with this pit in my stomach, wondering what she'd try next. Every evening I came home expecting something else to be gone, twisted, or tampered with. I started sleeping with the bedroom door locked. Not because I thought she'd hurt me, but because I didn't want to wake up with her rummaging through my drawers again. And then, just when I thought I'd hit peak exhaustion, she filed. I came home from work to find a manila envelope on the counter with the words, "To Kyle," scribbled in black Sharpie. No note. Just the divorce petition, already filed, with her attorney's information at the bottom. She didn't even hand it to me in person. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, just staring at it. My hands were still dirty from changing a tire at lunch. I didn't even wash them. Just thumbed through the pages, flipping past all the neat little paragraphs that outlined how she wanted the house, the condo, half of all liquid assets, alimony, and even custody of Peanut, our dog, for crying out loud. Despite the fact that she never walked him, never fed him, never even liked dogs before me. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of bitter, hollow laugh that comes out when you realize someone is so far removed from reality. It's almost impressive. That night, I drove to my brother Nate's place. He's 2 years older, married with 2 kids, and one of the few people I've always trusted without hesitation. He took one look at me when I walked in and said, "You look like crap." "Thanks," I muttered. He handed me a beer and didn't ask questions until I was ready to talk. That's what I love about Nate. No pressure, no judgment. When I finally told him everything, the fake documents, the laptop, the rumors, the money, he just leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. "She's planning something big," he said. "But you've got her beat already, right?" I nodded. "Mostly. Everything's moved. Hidden. Protected." "Then what are you really worried about?" I stared at the label on my bottle for a long time before answering. "That she's going to destroy everything on the way out just because she can. I don't care about the money. I care about my name. My reputation. The life I spent years building." Nate didn't say anything for a while. Then he stood up, opened the fridge, and pulled out another beer. "Well," he said, cracking the cap, "then it's time to start building something new. Just for you." That sentence stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I started shifting my mindset. I stopped focusing on what she might take and started focusing on what I could reclaim. My time, my energy, my purpose. I started waking up earlier. Worked out in the mornings, even if it was just a quick jog with Peanut. I deleted old photos off my phone that didn't spark anything but frustration. I went through my closet and got rid of the shirts she used to hate, the cologne she made fun of, the watch I stopped wearing because she said it looked too flashy. I started going out again, not to party, but to breathe, to remember what it felt like to be around people who didn't see me as an opponent in a courtroom drama. I met up with old friends, grabbed drinks after work, joined a local trivia night team. Small things, but they felt big. Then something unexpected happened. I got a call from an old client, a small cybersecurity firm I'd done freelance work for years ago. Their CTO was retiring, and they needed someone sharp to lead a new project. Nothing formal yet, just a conversation. But it sparked something. I started consulting for them on the side, just a few hours a week. The work was invigorating. The kind of deep-focused puzzle solving I used to love before life got so damn loud. And for the first time in a long time, I felt good at something again. Not just competent, valuable. Meanwhile, Morgan had no idea. She still thought I was the same guy she left at the kitchen table. Passive, predictable, safe. Her lawyer reached out through mine with a request for mediation. Apparently, she didn't like that I'd stopped responding to her emails. She was concerned that I wasn't engaging in the process. Translation: she was panicking that I wasn't reacting the way she expected. She assumed silence meant I was scared. In reality, it meant I was busy getting my life back. But then came the day everything shifted again. I was at work when my lawyer called. "She wants the condo, the car, and half your retirement account," he said. "And she's willing to give up the house in exchange. Says it's too full of memories." I almost laughed again. Full of memories? She hadn't even cried once since she dropped the divorce bomb. But sure, let's pretend she's the one suffering. And I asked. And he continued, "She's under the impression that your retirement account is worth double what it actually is." I leaned back in my chair. "Interesting. She's been digging," he added. "Trying to find out what's in your name, what's been moved, what's hidden. She's asked for account statements for the last 5 years." I didn't panic. I just smiled. Because she could dig all she wanted, but she wasn't going to find anything tied directly to me anymore. The accounts were legally sound. The transfers had been reviewed, approved, and airtight. The house, in my name, but under the trust now. The condo, still technically joint, but not for long. That night, I walked into the garage, pulled out the box with the old key fobs, and found the one for her car, the one I'd made a spare for years ago when she kept losing hers. I stared at it for a moment. And that's when it hit me. She thought she still had the upper hand. She thought this was going to be simple. She thought I was still that same quiet, agreeable guy who didn't like conflict and just wanted to keep the peace. But the man she was divorcing? He was gone. This version of me? He was just getting started. The first time I actually enjoyed myself during the divorce process was a Tuesday. That might sound strange. Enjoying anything while your marriage is crumbling and someone you once loved is actively trying to dismantle your life like it's a Lego set. But that Tuesday, something shifted. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. I had just come from a morning consult at the cybersecurity firm that had brought me on part-time. After the meeting, I stopped by a little diner I hadn't visited in years, the kind of quiet place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been brewing since 1993. I used to come here with my dad before he passed, back when he was teaching me about trusts, wills, and financial shields. I used to zone out during those talks, thought I'd never need any of it. But I was listening more than I realized. I pulled out a yellow legal pad. Yeah, old school, and started sketching everything out. Morgan's moves, my counters, her assumptions, and my realities. I made columns, circled leverage points, drew arrows and asterisks and little boxes around ideas I hadn't explored yet. This wasn't petty revenge. This was precision. She wanted a 50-50 split? Fine. But she was about to learn what happens when you try to divide something that's already been dissolved. You see, in her mind, the assets she saw were the only ones that existed. The condo, the house, the bank accounts she had login access to, the retirement account she'd glanced at once over my shoulder. She never knew about the second account, the one I'd kept separate since before we got married. It was funded quietly, steadily, with freelance gigs and a bonus here and there. Legal, traceable, but invisible to her. I never hid it. I just never offered the password. And the business I had quietly co-founded with an old college buddy 2 years ago, she didn't even know it existed. We had structured the LLC smartly. I was a silent partner. The profits came to me through a separate management entity that I'd registered under a shell trust. The same trust my father had once used to protect our family's assets from predatory lawsuits. The money flowed in legally and cleanly, just not with my name attached. Morgan's lawyer had already sent a formal discovery request, asking for account statements, asset valuations, vehicle titles, and more. And I gave them everything. Everything she already knew about. She thought she was being clever. She probably even thought I'd broken down in private, that I was crying into my pillow or begging Nate for emotional support. But she didn't know that I'd been quietly assembling my defense, piece by piece. And then, an opportunity landed in my lap. My friend Andrew, a brilliant financial consultant who now ran a boutique firm in Milwaukee, texted me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but he'd seen my name on a LinkedIn post and wanted to catch up. I drove up that weekend and we met for lunch, just two old friends eating overpriced poke bowls and pretending we weren't secretly looking for life updates. Eventually, I told him about the divorce. Not everything, just the highlights. He leaned back, nodding thoughtfully. You know, he said, I've dealt with a lot of high-asset divorce cases recently. If you want someone to help you pressure test your financial structure, I've got a guy. Pressure test. Yeah. Basically, see if your setup is bulletproof or if there's something you missed. We do it for clients before big buyouts or messy dissolutions. That night, I sent over every detail to Andrew's guy, a forensic accountant named Malik who made a living finding things people didn't want found. And in my case, confirming that everything was airtight. He got back to me 3 days later. You're clean, he said. No red flags. No loose ends. If she pushes too hard, she'll waste thousands chasing ghosts. Perfect. Meanwhile, Morgan was starting to get nervous. I could tell by the emails. They used to be smug, filled with little jabs like, once this is over, we'll both finally breathe again. Or, I hope you're preparing your finances thoroughly. But now they were clipped. Less confident. She was asking why the mediation schedule hadn't been confirmed yet. Why her lawyer hadn't received certain documents. Why things were taking longer than expected. I knew why. Because her lawyer had started digging and had come up dry. Still, I needed more than just silence on my end. I needed a public moment, something that would flip the perception. Because she wasn't just trying to get my money. She was trying to win the narrative. She was spinning stories to our friends, turning my distance into bitterness, my boundaries into instability. That's when I called Nate. You remember that charity dinner thing your wife's company is throwing next month? I asked him. The gala? Yeah. What? Think you could get me a seat at your table? He laughed. You hate those things. I know, but I think it's time I reminded a few people that I'm not the villain in her bedtime story. He didn't ask questions. He just made a few calls and got me a seat. In the weeks leading up to the event, I cleaned up, metaphorically and literally. I upgraded my wardrobe, got a real haircut for the first time in months, and even started working with a personal trainer just to clear my head. I wasn't reinventing myself for spite. I was rediscovering the version of me that didn't flinch every time my phone dinged with a lawyer's email. And somewhere in that process, something shifted in me. I started sleeping better, smiling more. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. What I felt now was sharper, more surgical, like I was playing chess, and the board was finally visible. The night of the gala, I showed up early. Crisp navy suit, polished shoes, confidence that didn't feel performative anymore. Nate clapped me on the back when I arrived and whispered, "I'm gonna cause a scene. I'm just here to say hi to some old friends." I replied with a grin. Morgan arrived 15 minutes later, and the second she saw me, her entire face shifted. You know that look someone gets when they thought they were walking into a trap they set, only to realize they're the one standing on the pressure plate? That was her. She was wearing some designer gown I didn't recognize. Hair perfect, smile ready for the camera. But when our eyes met across the room, she blinked. Just once. Just enough for me to know I'd caught her off balance. We didn't speak at first. Just moved through the room in separate circles, greeting the same people with different narratives. But the tide was turning. People who hadn't returned my calls were suddenly warm. Curious. Asking questions like, "How have you been really?" Or, "So what's next for you?" Morgan must have noticed. During the second course, she finally walked over to our table, pretending she was just passing by. "Kyle," she said smoothly. "Didn't expect to see you here." I stood up, polite. "Nate invited me." She nodded slowly. "Well, you look good. You too." There was a pause. "Hope things are going smoothly on your end," she added, trying to keep her voice light. "This whole process is just exhausting." I smiled. "Yeah, but I've had a lot of help lately. Legal team, financial advisors, the usual." Something flickered behind her eyes. "Oh," she asked, casual but too casual. "Yeah, been reviewing everything, making sure it's all accounted for." You never know what people might miss when they're trying to rush. I let that word, miss, hang in the air. She didn't reply. She just nodded, gave a tight smile, and walked away. And I knew she was going to be calling her lawyer the next morning, panicked. Because now, the game wasn't hers anymore. I had gathered allies, pressure tested my foundation, shifted public perception. And now I was holding all the pieces she thought she'd taken from me. She'd filed with a smile. She thought she was going to walk away with the house, the condo, the car, and half my soul. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already packed everything I cared about and moved it somewhere she'd never reach. Not a bank account, not a vault, but something she never thought I'd rediscover without her. Myself. And now that I had it back, it was time for the final play. There's a certain kind of silence you hear right before someone realizes they've lost. It's not dramatic, no gasps, no yelling, no shattered glass. It's quieter than that. A stillness. A pause between sentences where their mind short-circuits trying to reconcile what they thought would happen with what's actually unfolding in front of them. That's the silence I heard the day Morgan walked into mediation, expecting to gut me, and instead watched her entire plan collapse in slow motion. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the week before it all ended, the final stretch. Her lawyer had been pestering mine daily by that point, asking for updated asset disclosures, pressing us to agree to a final division of property before the mediation date. He was getting nervous, probably because every attempt to verify my holdings came up empty. He even sent a not-so-subtle email suggesting that intentional obfuscation of assets may constitute fraud. My attorney replied with a polite, two-sentence message. All relevant assets have been disclosed per legal guidelines. We suggest your client proceed with the scheduled mediation if she seeks further clarification. Translation: good luck proving something that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, I've been playing my final card behind the scenes. See, the Florida condo had technically been a joint asset, purchased during the marriage. Both our names on the deed. Morgan was banking on getting it in the divorce, not just because it was valuable, but because she'd already told her friends it was hers. She'd even started redecorating during our last trip there together, choosing new countertops like it was a foregone conclusion. But what she didn't know was that I'd had the property appraised 6 months earlier, and shortly after that, I'd found a buyer. An older couple who'd made a generous offer. I didn't close on it, of course. Not while it was still a shared asset. That would have been illegal. But I did have a pre-signed letter of intent and a legally binding offer, contingent on post-divorce ownership. My attorney filed a motion to buy out Morgan's half at market value, backed by the offer. If she accepted, she'd get a clean payout. If she refused, we'd take it to court and let a judge decide. It was the perfect trap. Either she took the deal and gave up her grip, or she fought and got less. Because unlike her, I wasn't trying to win. I was just trying to end it smart. And now, finally, it was time. Mediation was held in a tall, beige building downtown. The kind of place where every floor smells like printer toner and frustration. We were seated in separate rooms with our lawyers. A neutral mediator would shuttle back and forth, delivering offers like a human carrier pigeon. Morgan was already there when I arrived. She didn't look nervous. She was good at pretending, but her smile was tight, and her eyes didn't meet mine when we passed in the hallway. I sat across from my attorney, sipping lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup, while he reviewed our final numbers one last time. You ready? He asked. Let's end it. Round 1 was simple. Her team offered the usual. She keeps the condo, the car, and wants 50% of all identified financial assets, plus alimony for 5 years. Oh, and full custody of Peanut. Yes, the dog. I didn't flinch. We expected this. My lawyer politely declined the entire package and presented our own. She could keep the car and a lump sum from our joint savings, one she thought was still far larger than it was. I'd keep the house, retain all personal accounts, and in exchange, I'd buy her out of the condo immediately at market rate, based on the appraisal and buyer offer. Her reply came back quickly. She's not pleased, the mediator said, looking almost embarrassed. She's accusing you of hiding assets. My lawyer handed over all disclosures again, neatly labeled, compliant, bulletproof. She wants proof you're not funneling money through third parties. I already gave her lawyer everything that's legally required, I said. If she's got a theory, she can file a motion and chase ghosts. The mediator disappeared again. When he returned, His tone had shifted. She's willing to negotiate, he said. But she wants the condo. No buyout. My attorney smirked and handed over the letter of intent from the Florida buyers. She can't have what doesn't exist anymore. There was a pause. She sold it. I heard her voice from the hallway, high-pitched and breaking. She wasn't even pretending to be composed anymore. I didn't respond. Just waited. 20 minutes later, her lawyer stepped into our room. I think we should settle today, he said, avoiding eye contact. That's when the silence came. That heavy, pregnant silence that only shows up when someone's been checkmated and they know it. In the end, the final agreement looked nothing like what Morgan had imagined. She kept the car, a small portion of our joint savings, and a few personal effects. She didn't get alimony. She didn't get the condo. And she didn't get Peanut, because I had quietly gathered vet records, training receipts, adoption papers, and testimony from 3 neighbors that I'd been the sole caregiver for 5 years. It wasn't about the dog. It was about the principle. After the final signatures were inked and the documents notarized, we had to cross paths one more time, just outside the elevator. She stopped, looked at me. You changed, she said softly, like it was an accusation. I met her eyes. No, I just stopped letting you control the narrative. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, apologize, maybe. But no, she just adjusted the strap on her bag, turned, and walked away. A few weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend that she'd moved in with a coworker, someone she'd grown close to during the last year of our marriage. Funny how those things line up. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them, because I wasn't living in the past anymore. The sale of the condo went through. My consulting gig turned into a full-time remote role with equity options and a seat on the advisory board. I adopted a second dog, a scrappy little rescue named Charlie, and started hiking again. I even found myself smiling more. Not the forced kind, the real kind. And as for Morgan, well, she filed thinking she was divorcing a doormat. But what she actually divorced was a man who'd outgrown her. A man who let her believe she was winning, just long enough for her to lose everything she never deserved in the first place. And in the end, she didn't just walk away empty-handed. She walked away realizing she never really knew me at all. And that was the one thing she could never take.